I'm Jason Marsh. And yes, we're being recorded. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. I'm Jason Marsh. I founded the company more than 5 years ago now. And I've got two things I kind of want to communicate to you guys. One is that you are now members of the Flow tribe. You have no choice. You've just been recruited. The few words about that is we were out in the VR winter for the first 4 years of the company. And it was a little lonely and very challenging. And we felt like we were a single person dancing in a field saying, hey, look, there's this really cool thing. And we were kind of by ourselves. And now we feel like this group that has started to follow Michael and our sales, as our sales have started to take off, we feel like this whole group is dancing with us, just excited about what we're trying to accomplish, can relate to the mission which we have, which is to help humanity solve its biggest problems with better data communication. So we go into that. So thank you for being part of the tribe. And we are we have built the company by learning from customers every step of the way. We haven't taken VC money. We've built it because people asked us to build it. And we want you guys to tell us what we should be thinking about next and where we've got problems. There will be some bugs, but also, next features and how we can make the experience as practical and valuable to you. The other thing I want to communicate is that a lot of ways what we're doing is very cool, and we don't sell on cool. We have not tried to be cool. That cool, in my definition, is a sense of mastery and control. Think about that skateboard trick where somebody just totally nails it and they have that control over gravity in their board. Or think about Iron Man flicking his atoms around as he's designing, his power source. We see that as cool because we can relate to that mastery and control. And what we're trying to do is give you the ability to give you and your audiences the ability to control your data and information so completely that it can really efficiently help make better data-driven decisions, help people understand, build better 3D mental models of the information, and accomplish real-world goals and help personal, your companies, and the world's problems. So have you all on board.
Awesome, thanks, Jason. And yeah, so let's dive in. So let me start. I'm just going to quickly introduce some of the core fundamentals of Flow, and then very soon we'll actually all have you guys in a Flow together, and we'll be in augmented reality for anyone that has their phone handy or happens to have a headset. But anyways, let's kick things off. So
Michael, can you make me co-host again just so I can help out?
You are.
I lost it. Come back.
You have it now. You should.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So what I'm presenting to you is Flow. So we'll get into this later, but we call it Flow TriCast, where you can see my face and see the content on my screen at the same time. If you guys are familiar with OBS, it's like OBS Lights, quote unquote. Also, we have some other things that are specific to Flow, but ultimately we're solving three things. We're solving for engagement in a meeting. Or is your audience actually paying attention, or are they distracted doing something else? Two is levels of understanding. How deeply does your audience actually understand what you're talking about? Are they sort of nodding in agreement? And then third is levels of interaction. Especially if you can drive that interaction, it actually influences the other two, increased engagement and understanding. But it's that interaction that makes people feel part of a meeting. Just sitting at a meeting and just being quiet the whole time is not very conducive to helping make decisions or feel part of a group or a conversation. And so ultimately, all these things are driving towards driving better data-driven decisions, or in a sales use case, more sales conversions. And how we do that is through data storytelling. So we think of data storytelling as this combination between the narrative side of presentations and the data visualization side, the logic side of data viz. So it's combining narrative and data viz together to tell data stories that convey emotion, empathy, story, along with logic, data, and the substance. And I think that's why it's so powerful and why it's so important. It's almost like on one side we have the antidote, and on the other we have the core analysis, and each independently can only do so much, but combined is how you start to persuade audiences and move things forward. And so that's what we focused on. We have focused in on saying Flow is a data storytelling platform first and foremost. So while there might be some use cases that are a little bit more on the data heavy side of things for analysis, and there might be some on more on the presentation side, it's really the combination of the two that we've tried to harness. And it will be the big difference between us and sort of other visualizations. And so I would start with this one just as a very basic example of like what a data story is. So I think Donald Trump was almost notorious for telling some data stories around data. Anyways, let me pause. So this was the election map from 2020 on a county by county basis, except for the Northeast, which is township level. And Donald Trump would look at a map like this and say that the whole country voted red. But the counter argument to that is that land doesn't vote, people vote. And so if we adjust the size of these bars based on the number of votes that were cast, a very different story emerges, one in which the population centers of the US are mostly voting Democrat. And these are all interactive, you can move around it, et cetera. And there's one last layer we could throw on here, which is changing the colors a bit so that it's more representative of the actual ratio of Democrats to Republicans in those specific counties. And so this is just a very basic example, right? It's something we can all sort of understand, start to explore, and we'll start to interact more with this. But let's actually get you guys in Flow as opposed to just me literally eating my own words today, just talking all the time. So let me switch over here. And I'm going to ask that for those that would like to join on your phone, I would highly encourage it for mobile AR. And if you can do that by on Android devices, just opening your camera and then going to this QR code. And for any of the iOS users, please open up that WebXR viewer, which is the this that I shared in the chat window. You can also just search WebXR viewer in the App Store. All it is a browser by Mozilla Firefox that allows for WebXR, which will be in Safari, just not yet. It's in progress. So to come. So if you're in the WebXR app, if you tap on the address bar and click on the top right, you'll see a QR code reader. And so you're going to want to scan this QR code. If all else fails and you're not able to join on your phone or join in AR mode, you can just join on your computer. So one thing that we will instill basically over and over and over is that to us, the message is the thing that matters. The medium is just a mechanism by which you are communicating that. And so being able to reach people where they are is one of the big things about why Flow exists. It's like we want to exist both to improve the experience in AR, in VR, but on a flat screen, on a mobile phone, where people are today. And so I think that's just an important element that's sometimes lacking in the XR community. So this is pretty cool. So I can see everyone around here on their phone, moving around. A few of us have avatars because we're registered and have built some avatars, and so we can do that for people as well. Anyone having trouble getting in or need more clarification on how to get into this? I do want to make sure everyone is able to get into this before moving forward, since we have I think a smaller group here today.
I'm just seeing a blank screen on my phone.
Blank screen? Is it is it spinning, or what phone do you have?
A Samsung Galaxy. I see myself over there, the light blue one in the middle of the screen, but I'm not moving or anything.
Raya, refresh just for first step.
And is that also in, just make sure it's opening in Chrome as well?
Oh, okay.
That'd be the other, yeah.
Yeah, the Samsung Internet Browser is
I think it's in Firefox.
Really old, they haven't updated it in quite a while, actually.
That's good. That's good for us to know, actually.
I'm assuming that might be where you were at. Joe, you've got the biggest smile. I gotta call you out.
Firefox.
It's Firefox. Okay, got it.
This is so cool. I have it in AR, so like it's on my table and it's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, this is actually a fun math function, which it's plotting all the prime numbers. It's kind of a fun little math thing. But anyways, cool. So I think we're all in, right? Everyone can see. Anyone having any issues?
I'm still stuck, but I'm getting there.
Getting there? Okay. Oh, it's still loading on your side. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just wait a few minutes here, or a few moments, just because there's not too many of us and we have a little bit of time, so we'll be okay. It is pretty awesome actually to see everyone moving around. If you do want to record, feel free to do that if you are familiar with doing that on your phone. Screen recording is how we capture things. And this is actually how we create most of our videos too. It's through the cell phone and just screen recording, and then the other person's on the other side presenting, and everything's a one-to-one relationship. I think one of the coolest things about this is when someone's moving their phone left and right, it literally is moving that distance in real life too. So there's like a one-to-one relationship between your actions in AR and what you see other people doing. And I think there's something kind of amazing about that sense of presence, that people really are moving like that. So, okay, how are we doing? Are we in? I forget, sorry, who that was. That's, is it Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm gonna just use my PC instead.
Put a link in the chat window, and we can follow up offline to figure out what's going on the mobile side, but that's a good thing to note. But it looks like other people are good to go. Any other issues? If so, please message Sierra, Bill, or Jason in the chat window, and they can also help out too. So let's start to dive in. So this is a very basic example looking at life expectancy. And so why I like starting with life expectancy is that we can actually show so many different views of the same data in sort of a multitude of ways that reveal different insights. This first view is literally just a Christmas tree. This actually has no meaning, but just shows that with some mathematical functions, you can show and control sort of the orientation of dots, rotation of dots, and just to communicate where we're looking. So we're looking at dots from, or like the different countries. So we see Africa, the Americas, basically the different continents, and which countries we're actually going to be looking at for life expectancy. Now, let me move forward here a step and take it one step further, which is to say, let's take these and actually put them on a map. And we're going to make these bars that come off it. And it's based on the latest figure for life expectancy. And so we get a view of the globe, and there's different maps we could choose and all sorts of different elements here. But let's actually start to look at this in a way we can more easily compare and contrast countries together, as well as things over time. So here we see another view, and this is actually also a swarm that we built. So it's not a just text. It's actually an object that was built from a data viz to put this list together. And so these are the countries we're looking at. So pretty good representation from most of the globe. So let's look at life expectancy. And if we look at it today, that same view that we previously saw, but just look at 2018, who's sort of in the lead. We see Japan up here at 85 years almost. Yeah, 85 years. So they're leading the way. Afghanistan's lower here at 58. You can click on these dots at the very end to pull up additional information. Now, I'd like to point out just a few small things here, which is that, one, and to quote, Jason, it's cool that we're all in this environment together, but there are some actually really powerful things about this. The idea that I can see what people are clicking on or pointing at or looking at is actually something is really hard to do virtually. And just that ability to sort of get a little bit of sense of like, what are people looking at or interested in is actually really empowering to someone that doesn't necessarily know what you're talking about or have deep expertise in whatever you're covering. So I think that's a pretty fun interaction. So I go through a few more steps, and then I'll pause and get some feedback or some input from you guys. But just go forward 2 more steps here. This view, we're just rotating it so you know that we're looking at the exact same countries, but now we're just putting it vertical. So as opposed to horizontal, we're putting it vertical. And the reason being is that on this depth or on the width dimension, we're going to add in the year. So we're going to look at 2018, and then we're going to look at 1901. So more than 100 years, right? 107 years. What's happened? And I think this is like the amazing story of humanity, right? It's this increase in life expectancy that we're going from this average in like the 30s or 40s. We're actually the average in 1901 was 35.8 years. And that now our average is 75 years. That's incredible. I mean, that's just incredible growth considering before that, it was pretty much flat. And so let's actually take a look just at that, where let's look at just the average of life expectancy for these countries over time. And we see that it's mostly flat pretty much everywhere in the 1800s until 1900s, and then we see this increase. But we'll also see some pretty big declines. And I'm going to highlight one here, which is 1918. And I'm just curious on everyone on the call, if you guys have any suspicions about why life expectancy drops so much on average across the world in 1918. I will open up the floor to anyone that would like to volunteer their answer.
I'll take a stab at it. I think there was a pandemic.
Yep, you are right. So the Spanish flu, the last flu pandemic, we can actually see in the data. So if I expand this out, let's actually look at each individual country, and you'll see that that dip in 1918 is across the board. I mean, it's kind of amazing to see that level of granularity in it. Obviously, when I expand this out, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot to explore. There's a lot to click on, and we'll go through how we can enhance that and break it apart. But part of the data storytelling is being able to incrementally tell the story. It's not just putting one graph in front of people and saying, okay, go figure it out. It's let me incrementally tell you what's going on in this data and tell you a story. And I think this amazing story where we can see both the big picture of life expectancy increasing, but some of these horrible things like the Rwandan genocide here in 1994, where life expectancy dropped to 12.6 years in 1994. I mean, just astronomical, right? This gives you a different sense for sort of what we call the big picture and the forest and the trees. So you can see the big picture, but also be able to drill into more of these details and see a different story. And let me just do two last views here. One is just saying that, okay, let's use the average now as just a straight linear line. And how did people differ from average? And this gives you just a different view of the same information, where now you can see that there are overperforming countries here in mostly Europe and the US. And you'll notice that as I'm highlighting content, it actually is turning white. I might have accidentally, did it freeze on you guys? Or is it just on my side?
Actually, it did.
Okay.
It froze on me a few times prior.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Oh, mine's still working.
Still going? Okay. So this is the beauty of live betas, is that sometimes things break because we're always updated. We literally added, or we literally pushed a piece of code, I think an hour before this. So anyways, that said, that is most of it. So let me get out of this presentation here, and then we'll start to dive in together. But let me open it back up to the group and try to get your take or your input on what you've seen so far, and any other thoughts or impressions. And, also open up to Bill, Sierra, and Jason to add in anything.
Well done.
Yep, I'm okay.
Cool. So awesome. So let's I'm just going to present just a few more things, and then I'm actually going to pass it over to Bill. So I forgot to mention one thing in the intro. World War I was definitely an influencer. Sorry, Suzanne, I just saw your message in the chat window, where at the end of the war, people coming back to their home countries. But so I'm going to pass it over to Bill here in just a moment. And Bill has a great foundation element of just being able to give you some baseline understanding of the flow editor, so that as you guys get into building, this will be a good, firm foundation. And the other thing to note is that in about 15 minutes or 20 minutes, we're going to break up into small breakout groups. And each of you guys will be basically with either myself, with Jason, or with Bill and Sierra as a team. And we're each going to be teams that are competing against one another. So we're all going to be competing to tell the best data story. So we will each be sort of personal coaches to you guys to try to help win the competition. So I know our team's going to win, but that's besides the point. So let me pass it over to Bill here. And Bill, if you wouldn't mind going through that instructional on the timeline. And then after that, we can go through a little bit more.
Okay, great. Okay, share my screen. I hope everybody can see it, I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, so this presentation that Michael's been giving, there are various types of data objects that appear on each step in a flow. So a flow consists of one or more steps, and this particular flow has 13 steps. And this is the same flow that Michael's presenting, actually, or was presenting. So the data objects are swarms, which are sets of data. These are data sets. These are each one supplied by a CSV file. So we call those data sets swarms. Consists also of maps. So this particular step has one map here. Can consist also of images, and those are in the purple timeline down here. So this Tableau graphic is an image. This one's an image. And let's see, what else is on this step? There looks like there's 3 text boxes on this step too. So blue means text box. So here's a text box, here's one, and here's one. So whenever you're going through a flow, this, what we call the objects timeline, is your guide to what is on each step. And your job over the next couple weeks here will actually be to construct a flow. And you'll be constructing it from the same elements that I just described. Let's see. So this particular flow that Michael is presenting from consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 swarms, and these swarms appear on different steps. Okay. Now, in addition to composing your flow using these data objects, is a really nifty thing you can do. Like if you get a hold of this flow by clicking on this particular swarm, the way this works, any element on this section of the screen down here corresponds to a definition of that data that data element on the right hand side. So whenever I click through and go to a different swarm here, I'm advancing to the step that the swarm is on, but the definition of that swarm is over here also. So in this case, I think I clicked a little bit below the swarm, so I got a definition of a connection. So swarms, connections, which are ways of connecting the dots. Like here, the connection definition on this step is what connects this dot to the floor of the map, or the map. Okay, so connections, we have some things called area charts, which are just gorgeous representations that fill in areas underneath a curve. So these are the kinds of things you can work with. This is your guide to accessing the definition. And so if you get a hold of this flow from Michael and you see a wild and wonderful thing up here, if you spend a little time going through this definition over here, you'll be able to piece together how he constructed this particular step. So it turns out, I like to do this all the time. When I see a new flow that's really interesting, I like to just go through it, kind of decompose it by clicking around it, and I can figure out what's going on. So on this particular step, you notice this circular ring of data. Okay. That is because when Michael constructed this step, he chose that the swarm would be represented by a chart type of categorized columns. So we have several different chart types. The categorized columns puts the data into a set of columns, and you can even arrange the columns in a circular structure. So, and if you examine this definition really well, and you've been around a little bit, you'll see exactly how this was constructed. So this is the heartbeat of constructing flows. Over here on the left-hand side, if you want to add a new swarm, which means you're adding another CSV file with another new set of data, you click here, you can add swarms. You can add different types of connections and area charts. You can add maps, and you can add images and text, and then some other objects too. So I think that's all I really wanted to cover right now, unless there's some questions, but I just wanted to get across, this is your roadmap, this section down here, and you will access everything in your flow through these cells that I'm just just showing you with my cursor. This is quite a different structure than we've had before our recent release, and it's being very, very well received. It's a very nice nice way of keeping track of everything in your flow at once. Any questions on that? Okay. Okay, so you'll learn a lot more about this, and this is just an intro to that. Back to you, Michael.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Bill. And Bill is like our rock. He's just yeah. If you ever have questions, he has very in-depth answers for everything. So he's a great resource to utilize. And Sierra, having learned the tool fresh, also has a really good perspective, going through and learning, on the fly. So, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, stop sharing your screen.
Actually, I've got one thing.
Yep.
Just to notice that there's a help button down, help pop-up down in the lower right. And that will also guide you through some of the, take you through some of the help system directly based on what you're looking at, but also take you to our full documentation area in our website.
Yeah, and what he's mentioning is this little, let me move my body. No, not in the way. This little help button right here, that's what's contextually relevant based on whatever you're selecting to open up additional information. The other thing to note is that within help, there's also this get support. And I would encourage everyone to please use this to submit any bugs, requests, anything you have questions about. Just please use this, and we will then respond very quickly to anything that happens. But this is a great way for us to track things. And you can also email us or call us or anything you really want to do, basically. Cool. So I want to just elaborate.
David has his hand up.
Sure. And let me just make sure one thing real quick, and then I'll get to you. I just want to show quickly. So to Bill's point, once you're logged in, you'll notice that you don't have any flows, right? You haven't built anything yet. And so if you click on featured flows, you'll see a lot of different examples from the team. And all of them, you're able to basically click on edit, and it will basically say copy, flow, and edit. And that is how you literally copy over that flow and start to build your own. So just wanted to quickly highlight that you basically have access to all these other flows that have been created and can sort of learn from that. And David, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and asking your question.
Yeah, no. Only quick question was, I realize this is like a no-code intro, but I did want to ask, for those of us who might have a background in things like Matplotlib and R and data visualization from that perspective, how amenable is Plotly to that? Because so far, everything's been point and click, and that's great, and that's very useful. I can create any kind of CSV or whatever file I need.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I'm building these things on the fly, and I am unsure how to use this for something like data exploration.
Good question. And I will be transparent to say, I don't think Flow is necessarily the best on the data exploration side. I actually do it a lot more just because of now, like, I think that way. And so the name of the company, Flow, is literally meant to be around like getting people into that state of flow. And I will be transparent to say, like, I feel like I've definitely felt it a few times where as I'm working on the data set, I can actually visualize what's going to be happening very soon thereafter. And I'd say that on the exploration side, I think there's better, more powerful tools like R and a lot of things that we can actually do more of the calculations, the analysis. And so we've tried to just cut off our piece of the world, which is to say, we don't think there's problems with R or even Tableau or Power BI. Those are great analysis tools. But when it comes to actually communicating to a non-expert audience, we think those fall short. There's sort of there's a big movement towards dashboards, right? Like, what's the answer? Dashboard. But
yeah. That's exactly what I was going to ask is whether or not this is some kind of a transition between something like PowerPoint or LaTeX Beamer and various visualizations you can do in, I don't know, MATLAB.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to cover it as well. But we have something called the Story Creator, which allows you to create, quote unquote, like a dashboard like its existence for another user to then basically piece together a story. So it's more of you setting up the scenarios by which someone else can then select the data and tell whatever story they want. So that might be applicable, but yeah, to your point on, that iteration cycle between the data file and the actual visuals and keeping that loop tight, we do have some integrations with like Google Sheets to make that really tight turnaround, but we haven't focused too much on making our tool too powerful on the analysis and calculation side, because we think there's plenty of great options there, but there's not as many great options when it comes to presentations, interactions, and meetings.
Yeah. So
That-
is it what's the word? Is it a decent assumption for me to make that going forward, the CSV is basically the input or the input point?
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. For now, it's definitely something we're adding more data pipelines, and we do have some integrations with customers, but for now it's CSV focused.
Sounds solid. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great questions. All right, so I'm going to just quickly show a few more things, or maybe one more thing, and then we will actually start to jump into our breakout groups to get to know our individual teams a little better, and so you guys know sort of your main support person to go to and get to know our team a little bit. So on this, I'm just going to quickly go through actually building a flow, and the reason being is so you can start to conceptualize sort of the process that we go through as we build. And so for this, you can pick from a library of data. And so we have this life expectancy data from the training, which is what we just went through. And basically you can use that exact same data set and build all the same visualizations. So I'll start with this random orientation. So it's literally a meter by a meter by a meter. And then I'm going to add a step here. And on this step, I'll start to order it in a more logical manner. You can put life year on the width axis, put life expectancy on the vertical axis, and we'll start to see this starting to take shape. I can add in the countries on the depth axis. Let me go ahead and add another step here. And there's more we can do. So we can change the size of these dots based on something like the population, add a color scheme in here based on something like the continent that these are a part of. I'll add in what's called connections that are getting attached to the swarm. And you have a lot of different options for things to do with connections, but at a simple way, it's basically the way to connect dots together. And there's more we can do, so we can filter this information based on something like the year. Like we'll just look at that 1918. So let's look at sorry, I gotta find. There we go. And let's look at the years between 19. And so we will see that same huge decrease in life expectancy in 1918. So, I'm just not focusing too much on the story here, just so you can see some of the bits and pieces of adding a step, clicking in, starting to change that story. You can add in text to actually add some actual narrative to this, even adding a note, a line to actually connect this to a dot to add more specificity or explanation around something. We also have something called overlay text. So there's a lot more details to go into, but I really want to just set the course for more of like inspiring this group of what to build next. And with that in mind, I'm just going to show one last flow before we dive into our examples, into our little breakout groups. And that is going to be one story on the Texas outage. And the reason this is, I think, most applicable is that it covers a pretty wide swath of visualization types, but it also really shows how to build a story incrementally and just how you can sort of weave together a narrative and story. So we're just going to pick a few minutes on this. So I just put a link in the chat window, and then I will also, let me put this link back up if you'd like to also join on your phone as opposed to your computer or vice versa. Either option is fine.
That's not the right link. Paste your new one again, please.
Oh, sorry. I pasted the old one.
That will go back to the prior presentation.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Wrong flow.
One thing Michael didn't show is that there's a share button. He just clicks on that, and then it's alive. What he just built there with life expectancy is live and on the web and can be shared to anybody in the world. Or you can share it with an individual and keep it private, because we, as an enterprise, we're very focused on security as well as on ease of use for any, quick access for anybody in the world.
Yes, great point, Jason. And that's this little share button right here. So after you click on share, if I click enable public link, that means it's live, it's on the web, and anyone can access it from this link. And here's the URL. You can also get the embed code, or you can share it privately with someone's email. It will actually kick off an email to them so they can view it privately. So yeah, a lot of our companies or our enterprise customers are in consulting and financial services. So as you might imagine, first question we always get asked is about security and data privacy. And so that is very fundamental and core to our value proposition. So I'm going to leave this QR code up for just a moment here. I see less people in this one. So let me put this link back over here. Okay. Anyone having issues with this flow or getting into this experience? So I'm just going to quickly walk through this one, and you'll be live here. You can actually interact with the content as well. This is a pretty interactive version of the flow. So let's start to walk through. So there's two things you really need to know to understand this story. The first is that alternating current coming into your house is typically around 60 hertz. And that if it drops below this 59.4 hertz, that is actually causing damage to any power generation facilities, as well as any motors that are on the AC circuits. And so there's literally breakers that will go off if it's below this threshold for more than 9 minutes. So if I move forward here, the other thing to know is that Texas is its own power or its own grid. So Texas is a grid, and then there's the Western and Eastern interconnect. So if we look at what happens, on a very basic level, what happened? It got cold. So we're going to look at 4 different things: the temperature, demand, and supply, and price of electricity. So if we look at the temperature element first, this is just a very basic view of saying, yeah, it got cold. It's typically in the 50s, and here we're going below freezing. And if I move to the next step, that we also see that demand during this time is also increasing. So as it's getting colder, we're using more and more electricity. And back in 2011, the last peak was 59 gigawatts. And so we're already way above that. And then on the supply side, there's 108 gigawatts total, and that's made up of, and so this is a pieces of a whole construct that of that, it's made up of around 50% gas, natural gas, 30% wind power, and then a combination of coal, solar, and nuclear, the rest. And so on that first day, on the 10th, we actually see the first decline in wind generation. And so we go down 60% or down almost 40% on that day. And then if I continue to move forward, no one's power has been turned off yet. But when we look at the price of electricity during these few days, it actually reveals quite a lot because we can see the price 10x from the 10th to the 12th. So we're jumping to $300 for the price of electricity, or the price per kilowatt, megawatt. And I'm not going to adjust the scale on the y-axis until the 13th and 14th is when this goes crazy. So no one's power still has been turned off, but the price has jumped to $7,000 as of the 14th. So even though no power has been turned off, you can start to get the sense that there's clearly some factors at play that might be pointing towards some issues to come, where there's just not enough incentive, or they can put anything out there, but it doesn't mean that suppliers necessarily will be able to generate. And so on that evening is when we have the pretty large decline in natural gas supply, which is a huge contributor. But it's not just natural gas, right? It's across the board that we see decreases in electricity generation capacity. And so if we look back at that evening, we remember back to the frequency. So if we go below that threshold for more than 9 minutes, literally these breakers go off at the power plants, and this would have caused a rolling blackout that's would have lasted almost a month. And so if you can imagine being in that control center, as you turn off customers, it has the effect of helping keep the frequency up. And as power plants go offline, it decreases the frequency. And so here we see this, more and more plants going offline. And then we are below this axis at 1:51 in the morning, where they turn off 3 gigawatts worth of customers. And then 4 minutes passed, which I could only imagine how stressful that period of time was, but still under that threshold. So 4 minutes have gone by below that threshold. but then it does make it back up to recover, and we're back above the line. And so, you know, you can basically codify the 3 days that Texas was without power as just this little red area where those 20 gigawatts worth of customers that were without power, but that's 4.5 million people. This cost more than Katrina at $195 billion in damages, 70 deaths. And that if you look at the market or the rest of the period of time here, you can see how prices actually jumped to their limit at $9,000 on the 17th. So hopefully this gives you a sense of like what happened during this period of time and why power went off, and being able to look at different variables all at the same time, I think has a pretty powerful impact. So let me pause there. We'd love to get any impressions, and then we will go off into our little breakout rooms.
I absolutely love, this is Joe here. I absolutely love the fact that there's so much here, whereas like in a dashboard, you can only do so much before people get overwhelmed, but here they can really dig into what they need. They can see the relationships between everything. It's just amazing.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. And I realized one thing I didn't actually explain, if you're on your keyboard, if you use your scroll wheel, that's going to be how you zoom in and out. If you use your
wheel on your mouse.
On your mouse, yes. And if you use your right click, you can strafe up, down, left, right. And if you click and drag, that's how you rotate. So I realize I'm moving like very seamlessly throughout the environment, but I did not explain it to anyone else about how you can move. So apologies for skipping over that element here. But any other group thoughts here before we jump into breakouts?
I've
Just
got
a quick question. Oh,
go first.
I
No,
was
you
just
go.
going to ask how much of this code do you all have posted publicly at this point? Obviously, not all of it. It's still part of your thing, but I actually think there's a very good case to use this for data exploration type stuff, and I would love to tinker with it.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's try to connect separately and discuss more if you're open to it, David.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so the system is not open source, and it's not even an SDK. It's just a really hard business model to try to make a living off of an SDK. But let me talk a little bit about what we another aspect about what we just saw there, because if you're not careful, I'll talk about brain science all day long and drive you all crazy. Why does this feel so different than a PowerPoint, right? It's clearly, you could do what Michael did in a step-by-step PowerPoint, right? But there's something about being able to zoom in and focus on this idea and then just look up and see the rest of the information, or look around, whether if it's in AR and VR, yes. And what happens is your brain actually fills in this whole thing as a single mental model. If you think about PowerPoint, every time you put a slide in front of someone and then it disappears, you're actually violating the way the brain wants to organize information. There's this little thing called the hippocampus, which gives us our spatial reasoning. And this little guy, every time you disappear something in front of it, it's going to go, no, I hate you. Don't do that. And it's going to punish you by not helping you remember it, because it also ties both between our spatial awareness and to our memory. And so in this, what Michael's done with this is by lining up all these different visualizations, and in a way it's complex. Look at all this stuff you got to see. Well, because you can go ahead and focus in, and whatever, your brain is going to remember what's outside of the frame and continue to use that as how it builds a single 3D mental model. So I'll stop there, but I think you can get a sense of how we've really tried to think about what are ways that we can take advantage of the way the brain naturally works, and ways that PowerPoint doesn't naturally take care of doesn't consider the way the brain works, and how we can help make people have better 3D mental models.
Okay. Thanks. So, all right, with that, we're going to go into our little breakout rooms here. So I'm going to create some rooms and open those up.
cool stuff.
Yeah, here, I'll stop the recording for this.